Hey everyone, hope you guys are doing well. Today's video is going to be a very interesting video. It's a Game Week 10 draft wildcard, but this time around it's a no Haaland draft. And just to discuss no Haaland, I personally, within my own team selection, I have Haaland. I don't really have any plans of taking Haaland out. But since Game Week 8, a lot of people have already suggested the idea of going no Haaland, given the fact that a lot of captaincies would be going towards Salah over the near future. And I think obviously there's going to be another opportunity where you can say outside of Game Week 11, where Haaland seems to have a very nice game, Bournemouth at home, where Salah also himself has a great game, Luton away. Game Week 13 is probably the only other week with Haaland being a captaincy option versus Liverpool, but at the same time, you could maybe captain Son. And so if your opinion is that you no longer value the Haaland captaincies on those fixtures, I think it makes sense that you would pursue a no Haaland draft. Would I do it? No. Have I done it in Game Week 8? No, I didn't. And I still think it's very viable to do so. I personally just like to think that Haaland is someone who will be the better captain on those fixtures, and I will captain Haaland for that reason. And from an FPL sort of macroscopic point of view, I like the idea of having a team structure where I can cover all the best captaincies. I still personally think Haaland is the best captain on some weeks. But as it turns out, for example, in Game Week 9, where we thought Haaland was the best captain, that wasn't the case. And as I said, it ended up being a 50-50 with sort of Mo Salah and Haaland. As to whether I would captain that on the deadline stream, I decided to actually go instead with Haaland. But Mo seemed to work out perfectly well. But as we know, obviously that was also highly related to sort of refereeing incidents, such as, for example, the lack of a Konate red card, so on and so forth. So let's actually go to a Haaland draft. And I think what you have here is the chance to really upgrade on every single position on the pitch. The one position on the pitch I don't really feel like you need an upgrade on is the keeper position, in my opinion. I do think you can just simply go with Areola and Turner. I don't see a reason why you would actually pursue other keeper options. I think it's nice that we have Raya at such a cheap price. I think it's nice that we have Alisson, who has a great run of fixtures, and you could consider him. But personally, I probably wouldn't go towards spending money on the keeper positions. I would still try to maximize on the midfield positions and still the attacking and defensive positions as well. So starting with the defense, Areola and Turner already sort of assumed. You've got Trippier and Alexander-Arnold. This is your chance to really double up on these two superstars, right? You've got Tsimikas as well, who actually enables incredibly well. Dalot just to cover some good fixtures, and then Gabriel as well. Keep in mind, of course, that when Gabriel and Trippier are facing each other in Game Week 11, that's why Dalot is so nice, right? He gets to cover that fixture really well. And the idea here is because you're not going with Matty Cash, you're actually covering Matty Cash in a sense with even better attackers, I would say, in Trippier and Alexander-Arnold. At least from the point of view where we know that I would say Liverpool are a slightly better defense than Aston Villa, and also Trent, I would say, still more of a consistent outlet for this Liverpool team than Cash is, who's purely just an open play threat. Now, that's going to be the back five. Then we're actually going to move towards the midfield here, where you have a little bit more contention. And just having seen Trippier and Alexander-Arnold in defense, I'm sure a lot of people will be asking, someone has to go from Son or Maddison, and that's true. I've decided to keep Son here in this draft template. I think it makes sense to actually keep Son over Maddison. I think penalties could actually fall on both. We saw Raptor actually mention that someone from the Norwegian sort of news outlet had actually spoken to Maddison, and apparently, as it remains to be seen, the penalties can be split between whoever is confident on the day, which is not very good information. However, I still think that Salah and Saka and Son, these are probably the players, of course, where you're assuming that they take most of the penalties. So I'm going with these options. They're more trusted as well. As far as Son's minutes, it was actually nice to see him play over 80 minutes of football. We have been very concerned recently with this sort of knock that he's been carrying. And it's very evident that he's still carrying it. But good to see that he's actually able to sort of play out full football games. Good to see that he's actually able to play out 80 minutes. And we're actually seeing still very early Maddison sub. So if you want to take the point of view that, Son is getting subbed off early, I mean, technically so is Maddison. So for that reason, I think Son is very nice. Saka had the armband off last match, and also just seems to play more minutes than Odegaard. So I don't think there's really even a debate to be held between, let's say, Saka, Odegaard, and Martinelli. Martinelli, we know that there's a threat of Trossard. Odegaard, obviously, very unlikely that he gets subbed off, but we saw it in the Chelsea game. Whereas when Saka is fit, I find it highly unlikely for him to be subbed off unless it's literally 1 to 2 minutes to play and the game is completely sealed. Or, for example, in the Bournemouth fixture where, it's basically 3-0, 4-0 up and he can go off. And that was even still just because he had a knock. So those are the three sort of players that I think are your sort of penalty talismans. Then we actually have here Mitoma and also Diaby. I think if you can't afford one of these two players, what I would do is probably save a bit of money and actually go for maybe a Dingra and Diaby, or alternatively, you can actually push up and try a Dingra and Bowen as a pair. I still think that I like Diaby and Mitoma's fixtures going forwards. Yes, Diaby has been very disappointing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he's been a bad pick, right? The underlying stats are still there for Diaby, and the whole idea of Diaby and Mitoma for now is you hold on to these picks, and actually Diaby becomes a placeholder for Mbumo, whereas you can actually keep Mitoma for the long term. So I quite like the idea of that. And also keep in mind, in the future, when you need additional budget, Palmer will become an option where we can transfer into Palmer when Chelsea have good fixtures, and we can obviously continue to monitor Palmer's position. Because yes, he played false nine in the previous match, but if you're not planning to, for example, play Palmer as your eighth attacker, there's no reason really to have Palmer in a team in a 3-5-2 template. So I don't think he's going to be someone you need to call on every single match, and for that reason, I won't have Palmer on this draft. I do think Adingra is fantastic, but you can also push up and sort of upgrade towards Mitoma, which is something that I like. So Mitoma and Diaby sit on this draft. And then the front line is actually very simple. It's just Watkins and Alvarez, and also Archer, or who could also just be Mubama, right? Ultimately, you actually have 5 defenders here. I would rather you probably just go with Mubama, save a bit of money there. Watkins and Alvarez are the best 2 forwards, in my opinion, outside of Haaland. And in fact, if I was 3-4-3ing, I would actually keep the same 2 players as well, inclusive of Haaland. But if I didn't have these options, I would never even consider 3-4-3 on my regular wildcard templates. And because you're not going Haaland here, you're going 3-5-2. So this is the 3-5-2 template that I quite like. Yes, obviously the one player that's missing here is Maddison, but the question I would ask myself is, does Maddison have better fixtures than Trent Alexander-Arnold? And in my opinion, he doesn't. So for me, I would much rather have Trent than Maddison. And because of that, I have Trent in this draft as opposed to Maddison. And ultimately, the midfield options are extremely competent. And if you're happy to go without Haaland, this is the draft that I would go with. Yes, of course, there's going to be a question of when to get Fernandes back, when to get Mbumo back, when to maybe get Maddison back. But you're looking at a great opportunity to do so later in the season when ultimately Liverpool's sort of run of games will get a little bit worse, where I think there is a viable option around Game Week 17, around that time to probably go back into Maddison. And that's also the time when Spurs actually have really, really good fixtures again. So that's what I'd probably be eyeing up on a Game Week 10 wildcard draft if I was 100% going no Haaland. Definitely, I would still go Alvarez. Definitely, I would still go Watkins. These are, for me, still the best picks to actually go with. And yeah, that's sort of what I would sort of try to attain within a wildcard draft. Now, if you actually have more money, or you're, let's say, unsure about one of these positions, I think one easy thing you can always do is probably look at the defenders and actually consider which one you can actually drop into sort of like a 3.9 position. At the same time, what you can also look at is, for example, as I said, or something like Archer to Mubama, or even, for example, in the goalkeeping positions, just playing Areola and getting a 3.9 goalkeeper, maybe going with Ortega to try go for a punt. But that's not something I would necessarily advise. I still think, obviously, you have to think about blank game weeks in the future where you might want to actually go triple up on City after that blank game week, because on game week 20 we've got a double City game week, and that obviously is sort of calling for additional City players. So if you want to have 3 outfield City players, then you don't want to have Ortega as a 3.9 goalkeeper. So those are the only thoughts I'd like to add on top of this sort of draft structure. In terms of additional points, how I would line up this week specifically, I think it's rather obvious, right? You would just simply play Areola, starting off with a great fixture versus Everton here. Then you just play Trippier, Alexander-Arnold, and obviously Gabriel. Tsimikas is someone that I would bench. Dalot easily, of course, is on the bench this week as well. Tsimikas, yes, of course, it's nice to have Tsimikas versus Nottingham Forest at home, but I probably wouldn't really overstep with double Liverpool here. This is a very easy Trent Alexander-Arnold fixture. I would play the full midfield 5. All have good fixtures outside of maybe Son, who still on paper has a nice fixture just because of how strong this sort of Spurs attack is, and we still know that he's got a decent chance of being on penalties and probably will be fit for the next game. And Watkins, Alvarez, yes, of course, Alvarez has a weaker game, but I wouldn't say a weaker game necessarily than Tsimikas. I'd probably play Alvarez over Tsimikas, and for that reason, it would be just a simple 3-5-2. As I said, you're sort of rotating defenders here, and the reason why we're keeping Trippier and have no issues with, let's say, having him versus Arsenal is because you've got 5 defenders here. So on Game Week 11, all you need to do is just play Alexander-Arnold, Tsimikas, and Dalot. So all of them have great fixtures in place of, let's say, Arsenal, Newcastle, who are facing tougher fixtures. I also understand that some people actually love playing, Trippier basically effectively every game possible. If you're that type of manager, if you feel like you'll play Trippier no matter what, despite how hard the fixtures are, and you don't want to drop him to the bench, that makes sense, right? You could save a bit more money, get a 5th defender who's basically a 3.9 player and just upgrade one of the midfield options if you really want to go to, let's say, someone like Bowen. And that's it for the video. So thank you guys so much for watching. For me, captaincies as well, just long term, I would say probably is going to be Salah. And then game week 13 is probably going to be Son. And that's probably the only thing you need to think about. And that's why Son is also sitting on this draft as opposed to Madison, because I still think he's a slightly better pick than Madison, you know, when we're not including price into the argument and talk about efficiency. So therefore, Son becomes the better Game Week 13 captaincy option, which I always like to have in terms of covering captaincies. So let me know what you guys' thoughts are on Haaland. Are you tempted to go no Haaland? And what do you guys think about this draft? So thank you guys so much, and I'll see you guys in the next video.